So the last few things that you need to be aware of as you're setting up your character. If you go into Scene Graph Optimization, this exists in just about any script you can find. Go to Edit Plugin. There's a little section over here for skin and bones support. As you're rigging your character, you want to keep track of how many bones you're using, obviously because it's going to affect performance, but every time you go over 30 bones, it's going to break up any mesh that's attached to that so that no part of the mesh is affected by more than 30 bones. So for example, if you have a character with 32 or 34 bones, when you export that, that mesh will actually broken up into two, and now you've got two draw calls. It's going to impact your performance. But if you're aware of that, there's two things you can do. You can go and figure out if there's any bones you can delete that you don't need at runtime, or you can bump this number up if you really need to. It's just something to be aware of. It's there. If you need, for whatever reason, to get the draw call count on your character down, you can bump this number up. It'll break the mesh into fewer pieces. So that's there. And then the last thing I'd like to cover in this video is down here under animation options. There's a few things that are going to affect how your character is exported. One of these is your minimum bone influence percent. After you've got your character all rigged and skinned, if you export it and you find that the verts aren't moving quite the same in Gamebryo as they are in Maya, this is a good place to check. Any vert that's affected by bones and the weight on that bone is less than this threshold, it's going to call that influence. So if I have a vert that's affected by 5 different bones, but 4 of those bones affect it less than 10% each, it's going to call all those influences, and that vert will only be affected by one bone at 100%. So this is a good thing to check if you find that your skinning isn't coming across exactly the same as you set it up in Maya. You can pull this number down to 1%, or take it as high as you can take it all the way up to 50%, but you probably don't want to get it that high because then things are going to look significantly different. Another thing that it's going to do when it exports your character and animations is, by default, Gamebryo is going to sample all of your animation. What that means is, for every frame in the scene, it's going to check the translation, rotation, and scale of every object in your character root and write a keyframe for that. Now, if you don't want that, if you just want the exact keyframes that you set, you can go in here and turn off translation and rotation for sampling. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to sample. It's not going to sample if it can find keyframes directly on the objects. But if it can't find any keyframes directly set on an object, because that object, say, is parent constrained, or if you have it animated through an expression or by some other means, it's still going to sample those objects. And then also, if you are sampling rotation, you can tell it whether or not to sample rotations as quaternions or to keep them in Euler format. So anyway, there's a lot of information here, a lot of different things to be aware of as you're setting up your character rig, and we'll go into some of the specifics of these later. For example, we'll set up animation layers in a later video, set up a ragdoll. But as you're initially setting up your character's rig, these are some of the things that you need to be aware of to make sure that it's going to be compatible with all these other features later down the pipeline.